Everyone, welcome to, again, our St. Augustine Bible study here in Washington, D.C. I'm Father Pat Smith, pastor here at St. Augustine, and we're still journeying through the book of Daniel, one of the major prophets of the Old Testament. And we are still journeying, finishing up chapter 11. And but as always, we like to begin with a prayer. So let's pray in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Good and gracious God, we give you thanks for all of your many blessings. Lord, we ask you to anoint our minds with your wisdom and knowledge and understanding and insight and perspective. Lord, open our hearts to your love and your mercy, and open our hands that we may translate your word into the action of our lives. Lord, as we study these, in a sense, the ancient writings of Daniel, Lord God, may we be reminded that your word is good and new and relevant to our time. So God, so help us not only see the wisdom and insight in your word, but also how to apply it to our lives personally, to our families, and also as we discern what's happening in history today. Lord, may your word continue to guide us to be the people you call us to be, that we may carry out the work you've given us to carry out through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
The Son and Holy Spirit. Okay. So a couple of things I want to do today on this eve of Thanksgiving. One to again, just to very briefly, again, we had a very good question at the end of last week, and just to remind again why the significance, why we have such again detailed history. But I also want to do, and I didn't get a chance to give Alice a heads up, but just a sort of a brief trailer, not for the next book we're going to do, but for the brief trailer to the first and second Maccabees. Actually, that's because you'll see it to really help us better appreciate, because one of the questions of last week was about just all the detailed history. And you notice, if you pay attention to the footnotes, that lots of the footnotes put the scripture reference of first or second Maccabees. And so if you've kind of found it hard to follow just some of the, because in the text of Daniel we've been reading, especially in chapter 11, it describes different kings, different empires, and doesn't identify what they are. So we've been kind of heavily relying on footnotes to identify what they are. Well, if you read first and second Maccabees, it's actually, it's a reminder of the first place you go to interpret scripture is scripture. That's always the first place, because oftentimes when you go back, that that the listeners of the time of when any of the prophets are writing, presume the knowledge of the people listening, or those who will be listening, that okay, you guys know about this event in the past, so I don't have to go into detail about it. But in fact, we don't know those details, and so when we start talking about this conflict of nations, which is chapter 11, and lots of the kingdoms, the Alexander the Great and Antiochus and Ptolemy, and actually they're all explicitly the stories of let's say the atrocities and abominations of Antiochus are actually written. The story is all spelled out in first and second Maccabees, and so why don't I give you just a couple samples of that, and then we'll come back, to Daniel. But the first thing, again, part of what's helpful it's helpful when we see the details in chapter 11 of the different empires, is that on the one hand, it does so adds credibility to the book itself. I mean, sometimes it can be debates over certain times or the certain years when they're explicitly stated. But the reality is that there were these ancient empires of Greek empires and Persians, and these again leaders of Ptolemy and Antiochus, and again the Persians, the Seleucid people, the Greek Empire. So all those things that just historically, if you're just a secular historian wanting to learn about world history, these are all real people and emperors and kings and leaders that actually did exist. And so And part of the messaging of Daniel is in the sense of like, when we talk about history itself, that, that remember the great creation itself is an example of God starting history and entering to the history. He has spoken to the prophets. We say that in our creed. We believe in one holy Catholic. We believe in the Holy Spirit, the Lord, the giver of life, who proceeds from the Father and Son. With the Father and Son is glorified. He has spoken through the prophets. Daniel's one of the prophets. But the idea is that we can see throughout salvation history, which is the story of God entering into our story, that different ways we see how God's presence was manifest, even especially sometimes through the very messy parts of the history. And the idea is that as those who remain faithful to him, that ultimately even didn't mean it didn't face persecution, didn't mean it didn't face exile, didn't mean they didn't have setbacks, didn't mean they weren't falsely imprisoned, didn't mean they weren't persecuted. But in many times, in many cases, they were. But ultimately, as we'll see today, especially, we'll see in the Old Testament where where really the idea of the afterlife was introduced. Because in chapter 12 that we're going to get to in Daniel, it's where Daniel speaks about resurrection. Again, where to get that idea? And we'll see that as we take a bit of a short trailer through Maccabees, we'll see that actually it's in Maccabees that the idea of life after death, a belief, a confidence that we live on even after death, is introduced, in the Old Testament. It's the first, long before Jesus. So anyway, so that's what we want to accomplish today. And so again, the other reason, again, as we look at, as we go through again all the many details of these historical events, is not only, again, it puts the message of Daniel into, again, a credible context that, again, it's not just a fairy tale of, like we have fairy tales, we have, Rapunzel or, all, whatever the different stories the fairy tales we learn. But these are a message that's relevant to the historical situation that's going on. And the fact that because that's the case, we can also relate it to our historical situation. History has not ended yet. We are still in, there are many chapters in the long book, and we're 2021 is one of the chapters. And so the idea is that the message of Daniel wasn't just relative, significant to the history happening in his time, but also after his time, and he sort of alludes to that. But we know that, for example, how Jesus would actually, we'll see, reference to the book of Daniel, and use the same terminology as Daniel when predicting what was going to happen in his time. And the reality is that we'll see again just how ways that that's true for us maybe today. And we know also John the Apostle, the author of the book of Revelation, John, or one of his disciples, wrote the book of Revelation and looking at how do we, in this time of persecution and, with the Emperor Nero, and how do we make sense? Because again, Christ is risen, he ascended to heaven, we're the church, we're called to, and yet there's still tyrants who are some horrifically brutal. There's still martyrs. And it's like, how do we make sense of that and still see, in a time of persecution especially, how this does not negate the fact that God is, that God still is, and God's on our side. And so let me look at, so first maybe just to mention maybe just some examples of that. Let's first look at I mentioned the book of Maccabees, the two books, First and Second Maccabees. Now, First and Second Maccabees is actually two books that are not in the traditional Protestant Bible. I think of the traditional King James version. Remember the Old Testament for them was 66 books. Catholic Old Testament is 73 books. I'm sorry. the whole, I'm thinking the whole Bible. So it was really for the Protestants 39 books in the Old Testament, and for Catholics 46 books. And remember, the key was there were two versions of the Old Testament in the time of Jesus: a Hebrew version and a Greek version. So the Hebrew version, for devout Orthodox Jews, they saw the Hebrew version of the Old Testament as the inspired version. They didn't accept the Greek version as inspired, but both existed. Now, when Christianity came along, that as we know, that for a short time Christianity existed in Jerusalem, and but then when persecution started, they got pushed out of Jerusalem, and so we see like Paul, going down to Greece and Athens, and now he's teaching. Remember, there's no New Testament yet, so he's teaching the faith. And so if he's going to say, well, for example, in the prophet Isaiah, it says, a virgin shall have a son, and he shall be called Emmanuel. When he'd want to be preaching about Christ, let's say the birth of Christ, and then use his references to talk about Abraham and Isaac, and well, if he was quoting the scriptures, people in Athens only spoke Greek. They didn't speak Hebrew. I mean, there may have been some very educated people who knew some Hebrew, but it was a Greek audience. So one thing we can be very confident of is we know the apostles did not limit themselves to the Hebrew scriptures, the 39 Old Testament books, that they literally have been quoting, again, the Greek version, using that to bring the message of Christ to the Greek speakers. So my point is that, so that's part of justification. We look at today, it's not that that the 46 books. So the Catholic Church said that when they defined inspired books, in fact, they'd already defined the canon of books. It was only when Martin Luther in the 16th century broke away that he wanted to say, okay, I want to translate the scripture into German, to his native language. And he had a dilemma. What version of the Old Testament do I translate from? Do I do the Hebrew version or the Greek version? And actually, there's some things in the Greek version, like 1st and 2nd Maccabees, that Martin Luther really was not comfortable with, because it talks about, it brings up things like praying for the dead. And at the time, when he was dealing with, like abuses, of where, indulgences and people paying money to, for prayers. And it was such a time of confusion where actually, canonized saints today also, wasn't just Martin Luther, were also critical of how somehow spiritual things are getting mixed up in the secular. And so Martin Luther said, I don't even want to hear, he just totally rejected 1st and 2nd Maccabees. He did not, he said, I'm just going to use the books of the Hebrews do. The main problem with that is that the very same Orthodox Jews who do not accept the inspiration of the Greek version of the Old Testament also do not accept the inspiration of any of the New Testament. So it's like, for Martin Luther, if it's like, okay, I want to take the preferred Old Testament of the group that doesn't accept any of the New Testament. So that's kind of it'd be like, well, why would you say they're the authority when they don't even accept any of the New Testament? So anyway, I didn't mean to go too far into that, but anyway, so if you have a Protestant Bible and you're like, where is 1st and 2nd Maccabees? It's like, if it only has a 39 books, sometimes more modern day today, you have more even Protestant biblical scholars that will either just include it outright, or others who at least have it either as an appendix at the end of the Bible. It's like, here are the other 7 you can read, or as maybe even the middle of the Bible as they call deuterocanonical books. So anyway. But anyway, so again, when we look at so just a couple of things about maybe the best is to let me just give you a quick passage to look at. We can see, for example, because what we've been started reading in chapter 11 of Daniel. I'll just give you a trailer. Just at the very beginning of 1st Maccabees. You sort of see the details of what when Daniel was referring to some of the the strong king, who would be broken into several kingdoms, and actually realize, and again the footnotes tell us, it's talking about Alexander the Great. So just look at just as an example, a couple of things to put in context what we've been reading. So we can start beginning. After Alexander the Macedonian, Philip's son, who came from the land of Kittim, Kittim actually is Greece, had defeated Darius, king of the Persians and Medes. Remember, part in Daniel, we had again, you have the Persians, you have the Greeks, you have the later on the Romans. Anyway, so he became king in his place, having first ruled in Greece. He fought many campaigns, captured fortresses, and put kings to death. He advanced to the ends of the earth, gathering plunder from many nations. The earth fell silent before him, and his heart became proud and arrogant. He collected a very strong army and conquered provinces, nations, and rulers, and they became his tributaries. But after all this, he took to his bed, realizing he was going to die. He therefore summoned his officers, the nobles who had been brought up with him from his youth, to divide his kingdom among them while he was still alive. Alexander had reigned 12 years when he died. And if you recall, and we've read that in Daniel, but the king whose kingdom was split up, not with his posterity, not with his sons, but again, divided among other of his officers. So verse 8 says, so his officers took over his kingdom, each in his own territory. And after his death, they all put on royal crowns. And so did their sons after them for many years, causing much distress over the earth. So you have this one king, Alexander, now you have these four kings, each claiming, their authority. And so the next section there you have, it says in verse 10, again, it talks about again the pact between the Jews and the Gentiles. Okay, look verse 10, because we're going to talk. We mentioned the last time, and this extraordinarily wicked king Antiochus. It says there sprang from these a sinful offshoot, Antiochus Epiphanes, son of King Antiochus, once a hostage at Rome. He became king in the year 137 of the kingdom of Greeks. In those days there appeared in Israel men who were breakers of the law, and they seduced many people, saying, let us go and make an alliance with the Gentiles all around us. Since we separated from them, many evils have come upon us. The proposal was agreeable. Some from among the people promptly went to the king, and he authorized them to introduce the way of living of the Gentiles. Thereupon they built a gymnasium in Jerusalem, according to the Gentile custom. They covered over the mark of their circumcision and abandoned the Holy Covenant. They allied themselves with the Gentiles and sold themselves to wrongdoing. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a second. So when we hear in Daniel about, again, the response, we'll review it quickly in Daniel. We see kind of more the details in Maccabees of what actually happened and just how was the faith corrupted and how did the people. And so I just want to mention one thing. When I was reading this, it says here, it says they built a gymnasium in Jerusalem. You might think, a gymnasium? Like where you go and work out? But actually, this is what gymnasium was used for back in that time. And I'm reading a footnote in my Bible. It says gymnasium, a symbol and center of athletic and intellectual life. See, we think of, not just athletic, but center of athletic and intellectual life. It was the chief instrument of Greek propaganda. Think about that just for a moment. Gymnasium, the chief instrument of Greek propaganda. How do we, spread, lead people away from the faith that they knew, as now this king has taken over? How do I get the young people, to attract them? So let me continue. So see, it was a chief instrument of Greek propaganda. Jewish youth were attracted by sports and encouraged to join the youth clubs. They received training in military skills and in the duties of citizens. Through participation in the intellectual life, many were gradually won over to paganism. Isn't that fascinating? I thought so that, again, that a key to, again, you want to win over, it's like the youth, go to the young people. How do you indoctrinate them? How do you introduce, why think of why there's such a battle over history today and what's taught in history. It's like it really does matter what you're taught, how you will view the world, how you will view society, how you will view, and so why it's so important. Yes, I see there's a question.
How can we learn more about how the additional 7 books were included in the original Greek version or taken out from the original Hebrew version?
Well, actually, I would say there's an area, of theology called apologetics, but it has nothing to do with apology. It means defense. So actually, if you simply look, you go, whether it be Catholic Answers, that Catholic Answers is a group that really deals in a lot of the common question. Why do we confess our sins to a priest? Why? And so it's actually it's very prominently online. You look at Catholic resources. It could be the New Advent as another. So there are many. But you can find, so even people like Scott Hahn, the St. Paul Institute that he founded. So it's really, but if you look up just even Catholic apologetics and say Protestant Catholic Bible, and it gives you the very specific details. And just so you're clear again, it's not a matter of, because people say, why did the Catholics take out add books to the Bible? So talk about what when it was the council, when the books, I think it was Council of Trent, when the books were identified, that there are what are the inspired books, because there were other books written. There was Gospel of Peter, Gospel of Thomas, and it really was in the councils, and the bishops gathered together, prayed for guidance of the Holy Spirit to determine what are the authentic inspired books of the Bible. And so they read books like the Gospel of Peter and realized that no, that's not. And they had very good reason, because there were certain things that simply contradicted from what we knew as the early church teaching of the apostles, the first apostles, whose job was again to continue to spread the message that they received directly from Christ. And so if you read some of those other books. So again, you can even go to a library. You can actually find the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel about Peter and other books. But you reject the Gospel of Thomas. Is pretty easy to see why I was rejected, because there's some kind of really bizarre things in it, whether about Jesus' childhood and getting, I can't remember if that was a book or another where Jesus got mad at somebody and cursed them, they died. Classmates, so much for fighting on the playground. People learn not to fight with Jesus. Other stories of how women are saved, and really bizarre stories of Adam. The one story of creation, the rib of Adam, Eve is taken from the rib of Adam. Well, somehow in this bizarre way, for women to be saved, somehow they go back into Adam. So there are things like that. They're like, no, this is not. So there were different reasons and legitimate reasons that there are certain books that were left out of the canon. Canon means list of books. But again, I'll just show you the simple version. There were 2 versions of the Old Testament in Jesus' day, a Greek version, Hebrew version. One had 46 books, one had 39 books. And so the church had already, before Martin Luther, had already defined, been using for centuries the Greek version of the Old Testament. Owing to the controversy of the 16th century when Martin Luther broke away.
I'm just calling to tell you that Mass is at 10 tomorrow, so I'll pick you up around 9:30. Bye.
Okay. Anyway, so so again, there were 2 versions, and the church had been for years. And when I said from the very early on that we absolutely know the apostles went beyond Jerusalem, preaching to Gentile audiences, to Greek speaking. So if they quoted scripture, you can be sure they did not quote Hebrew, because they wouldn't know what they're talking about. Okay, so anyway, so with that, but those are some things that I mentioned. New Advent, also Catholic Answers. That's probably even a better source to find more about the question of the Protestant and Catholic Bibles and why, and the number of books. So you can easily find that. So anyway, when I mentioned this, because I did not realize when I was reading the footnote again that one of the chief instruments of Hellenistic propaganda, of Greek propaganda, was the gymnasium. Again, it made so perfect sense, that Jewish youth were attracted by the sports and encouraged to join the youth clubs. They receive training in military skills and again, and in intellectual center for intellectual life. So they learned about, again, gradual 1 over to the thinking. Now, again, that's again, you think of was it Hitler youth camps? I mean, similar. It's not unusual. You had almost in every where you see countries taken over or propaganda seeking to win over. It's like, how do we indoctrinate and re-indoctrinate again young people, or popular media. I think today, like more than ever, with social media. But in a sense, that part of, again, is so when we're reading about what were they up against. So in the book of Maccabees, basically, just so you know what's relevant to Daniel, because again, you don't get all the, a couple of things. There's first and second book of Maccabees. First book of Maccabees is actually, it kind of gives, it kind of gives, again, the historical record, the story of how not only Antiochus Epiphanes, the abominations he did to try to, I'll give you a couple of examples of how he went further. And just to, because again, this will put in context, I think, what we've been reading in Daniel. So for example, it mentions him specifically, and we go back to Maccabees, verse 16. When his kingdom seemed secure, Antiochus proposed to become king of Egypt, so as to rule over both kingdoms. He invaded Egypt with a strong force, with chariots, and elephants. Elephants were important. Part of the Seleucid armament, and it's said that he had over, let's see, what was interesting. He had procured 500 elephants from India. So again, lots of detail. 500 elephants. So he again, as he took over, again, he also started to persecute, again, the Jewish people, those who again want to remain faithful. In verse 41 of this chapter 1, it mentions how, the king wrote to the kingdom that all should be one people, each abandoning his particular customs. Verse 42, all the Gentiles conformed to the command of the king, and many Israelites were in favor of his religion. They sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath. Verse 44, the king sent messengers with letters to Jerusalem, to the cities of Judah, ordering them to follow customs foreign to their land, to prohibit holocaust, sacrifices, libations in the sanctuary, to profane the Sabbath and feast days, to desecrate the sanctuary and the sacred ministers, to build pagan altars and temples and shrines, to sacrifice swine and unclean animals, to leave their sons uncircumcised, and to let themselves be defiled with every kind of impurity and abomination, so that they might forget the law and change their observances. Okay. And finally, verse 54, we jump down to that. We see, and this is the key, on the 15th day of the month Chislev, in the year 145, the king erected the horrible abomination upon the altar of Holocaust. And in the surrounding cities of Judah, they built pagan altars. They also burnt incense at the doors of houses and in the streets. Any scrolls of the law which they found, they tore up and burnt. Whoever was found with a scroll of the covenant and whoever observed the law was condemned to death by royal decree. So they used their power against Israel, against those who were caught each month in the cities. On the 25th day of each month, they sacrificed an altar erected over the altar of Holocaust. Women who had their children circumcised were put to death in keeping with the decree, with the babies hung from the necks. Their families also, and those who had circumcised them, were killed. And it goes on and on. So it's pretty brutal. Okay, so that's, Daniel doesn't give us all those details, but so I just wanted to, when I said sort of the trailer with Maccabees, if you just want to, especially today, sometimes if you just I mean, I know you don't have to, if you, whether you have, remember the thing came out called the Bible Experience? In that particular one, it was basically different celebrities and actors, and then and some actually ministers and just people known to have, who were just known for, again, being powerful performers or speakers, like, the James Earl Joneses or the LeVar Burtons or whatever, the people that were. But anyway, they basically, but actually, unfortunately, they wouldn't have concluded Maccabees. So scratch that. But for other books, I would say that actually, even on YouTube, if you just YouTube audiobook, a Bible, Maccabees, that sometimes if you think of you're, cooking a turkey, or you're doing some extra cleaning or something, or you just have time, Saturday, and just play the audiobook, and just listen to the stories and listen to, and the actual kind of what fit. So First, Second Maccabees is a great where you can sort of get more. It's like add more flesh to the skeleton of the whole picture of what what they were up against. What was happening. Like I mentioned, the whole thing of the gymnasiums. Just how. So anyway, I just encourage you to do that. So First Maccabees, in a sense, actually tells the story. Second Maccabees is not actually it actually retells the story, but adds more detail and but also kind of gives a theological perspective, a view of how these secular kings and their efforts, but basically just theologically the significance of that. So one of the famous stories in Second Maccabees, and I'll show you part of it. So that's the last part of Maccabees, but it's a story. It's in chapter 7 of Second Maccabees. And I just wanted to share, it's a story of a mother and her 7 sons. So this, again, the kind of detail you're not going to get in Daniel, but to kind of see, again, what they were up against. And then I'll show you in a second, of course, also how it relates to beyond even the history of Daniel. Now, again, actually, it's a long story, but I won't read the whole thing. And actually, it's really brutal. But basically, again, chapter 7, the martyr of of a mother and her 7 sons. It goes. It also happened that 7. Maybe it's worth reading. It also happened that 7 brothers with their mother were arrested and tortured. We already heard that babies were circumcised, were strangled and hung, and parents. Pretty horrible. It also happened that 7 brothers with their mother were arrested and tortured with whips and scourges by the king to force them to eat pork in violation of God's law. One of the brothers, speaking for the other, said, "What do you expect to achieve by questioning us? We are ready to die rather than transgress the laws of our ancestors." At that, the king in a fury gave orders to have pans and cauldrons heated. While they were quickly heated, he commanded his executioners to cut out the tongue of one who had spoken for the others, to scalp him and cut off his hands and feet, while the rest of his brothers and mother looked on. When he was completely maimed, but still breathing, the king ordered them to carry him to the fire and fry him. As a cloud of smoke spread from the pan, the brothers and their mother encouraged one another to die bravely. So just read that line again. As this horrible thing you just described. When he was, as a cloud of smoke spread from the pan, the brothers and their mother encouraged one another to die bravely, saying such words as these: "The Lord God is looking on, and he truly has compassion on us," as Moses declared in his canticle, when he protested openly with the words, "And he will have pity on his servants." When the first brother had died in this manner, they brought the second to be made sport of. Again, after tearing off the skin of his hair of his head, and asked him, "Will you eat the pork rather than have your body tortured limb by limb?" Answering in the language of his forefathers, he said, "Never." So he too, in turn, suffered the same torture as the first. At the point of death, he said, "You accursed fiend, you are depriving us of this present life. The King of the world will raise us up to live again forever. It is in his laws that we are dying." That verse, again, first reference, what did he say? again, you are depriving us of this present life, but the King of the world will raise us up. Okay. And again, that was again the first we see again a future belief of resurrection of the body, at least of the just. Okay. And again, verse 10, after him, the third suffered the cruel sport. He put out his tongue at once when he was told to do so, and bravely held out his hands as he spoke these noble words. It was from heaven that I received these for the sake of his laws. I disdain them. From him I hope to receive them again. Even the king and his attendants marveled at the young man's courage, because he regarded his suffering as nothing. Again, I hope to receive them again. Resurrection of the body. Remember in our creed, we believe, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and life everlasting. Amen. He says, you can cut off my hand, cut off my feet, because I will get them back. We believe that the part of us is that with the resurrection is Jesus appeared with a glorified body. We receive a body. The body we have is corrupt. It becomes part of the earth, but we don't. So just as I say, often said, we're not just spiritual beings. If people say I'm spiritual, I say you're not a ghost. That I am body and soul. And the reality is that not only is my soul eternal, not only do I live and look toward to a future of being a ghost, of just being spiritual, but God also promises us a body. We believe in the resurrection of the body. Okay. And so here, first place in the Old Testament, you start to see this concept being talked about again. And that's part of why they had the courage. So I'm going to jump to just the last son. Remember, she had 7 sons. And finally, so verse, let's see. Yeah, so look at verse 20. Let's jump to verse 20. Because it didn't introduce the mother. And most admirable and worthy of everlasting remembrance was the mother, who saw her 7 sons perish in a single day, yet bore it courageously because of her hope in the Lord. And filled with a noble spirit that stirred her womanly heart with manly courage. Sorry, ladies, but you get it. It's a courage. Courage doesn't have a gender. But she exhorted each of them. So she, the mother, exhorted her children in the language of their forefathers with these words, verse 22. I do not know how you came into existence in my womb. It was not I who gave you the breath of life, nor was it I who set in order the elements which each of you is composed. Therefore, since it is the creator of the universe who shapes each man's beginning, as he brings about the origin of everything, he in his mercy will give you back both breath and life, because you now disregard yourselves for the sake of the law. So this mother, she's saying that I trust, I believe, he will give you back to me. That while she's just watching these horrible, brutal destruction of her, just like, I believe you'll bring me back. This is not the last time. It just hit me as I was saying this. In the news today, was a mother of Aubrey, the Ahmaud Arbery. And hear her speak after, and then she lost her son brutally. But she speaks, but the idea that for people of faith, which she identified herself as, is that this is not the end. I will see him again. Okay, she didn't say those words today, but she's clearly talked about her faith. And somehow that even though this child, did not bring her son back, and she didn't expect it to, but just the idea that, again, this is where you see the ancient texts of Maccabees, the ancient texts of Daniel is a living word that can bring comfort to someone today who says, I understand. If let's say let's say the mother of Ahmaud Arbery was a young man who was jogging and who was killed, shot to death and convicted and murdered. What if she maybe she has a King James Bible, no one told her that there's Maccabees. What if she read this today? I suspect she would relate, because she's a woman of faith. I heard that the idea of being able to I know what it feels like to brutally lose a son. And that's the idea where the scriptures, God's word is an eternal word. It can speak to you. It can speak to people centuries ago, and it can speak to you today, if your ears are open to listen, if you're willing to read it. But I just want to continue with this mother. But her faith that God will give you back to me, bring you breath and life. Verse 24, Antiochus, suspecting insult in her words, thought he was being ridiculed. So again, this is Antiochus described in Daniel. Again, so now you have a little more detail about how she's directly dealing with him. Antiochus, the one who was the abomination, created, put a statue of himself in the temple. So in verse 24, Antiochus, suspecting insult in her words, thought he was being ridiculed. As the youngest brother was still alive, so she had 7 sons, 6 were killed. The king appealed to this last son, not with mere words, but with promises on oath, to make him rich and happy if he would abandon his ancestral customs. He would make him his friend and entrust him with high office. When the youth paid no attention to him at all, the king appealed to the mother, urging her to advise her boy to save his life. After he had urged her for a long time, she went through the motions of persuading her son. In derision of the cruel tyrant, she leaned over close to her son and said in their native language, "Son, have pity on me, who carried you in my womb for 9 months, nursed you for 3 years, brought you up, educated and supported you to your present age. I beg you, child, to look at the heavens and the earth and see all that is in them. Then you will know that God did not make them out of existing things. And in the same way, the human race came into existence. Do not be afraid of this executioner." Verse 29, "Do not be afraid of this executioner, but be worthy of your brothers and accept death, so that in the time of mercy, I may receive you again with them." She had scarcely finished speaking when the youth said, "What are you waiting for? I will not obey the king's command. I obey the command of the law given to our forefathers through Moses. But you, who have contrived every kind of affliction for the Hebrews, will not escape the hands of God. We indeed are suffering because of our sins, though our living God treats us harshly for a little while to correct us with chastisement. He will again be reconciled with his servants. But you, wretched, vilest of all men, do not in your insolence concern yourself with unfounded hopes, as you raise your hand against the children of heaven. You have not yet escaped the judgment of the Almighty and all-seeing God. My brothers, after enduring brief pain, have drunk of never failing life under God's covenant. But you, by the judgment of God, shall receive just punishments for your arrogance. Like my brothers, I offer up my body and my life for our ancestral laws, imploring God to show mercy soon to our nation, and by afflictions and blows to make you confess that he alone is God. Through me and my brothers, may there be an end to the wrath of the Almighty that has justly fallen on our whole nation." At that, the king became enraged and treated him even worse than the others, since he bitterly resented the boy's contempt. Thus he too died undefiled, putting all his trust in the Lord. The mother was the last to die after her sons. Enough has been said about the sacrificial meals and excessive cruelties. The mother in the end was the last to die. So again, that whole story. So you're not finding it in Daniel, but it tells you just how, just in one family, how the oppression, the oppressiveness of this, the oppression of this particular king, but also, so in Maccabees, it's the story of, in the sense of, because which we're not getting to is now the response. So really Maccabees, actually word Maccabees means hammer. It's kind of like it was, the story of warriors who were zealous for God, for his laws, for his temple, and we can even say for his liturgies, meaning the liturgy, that's what we do, the rites and rituals we do as a way of honoring and worship God. And so Antiochus Epiphanes was like, get rid of all of them. Burn the law. Whenever they found it, they burned the books, the law, the scrolls. They decimated the temple. He took everything valued, stole everything, put up his own statues, and he forbade the practice of you practicing religion. Remember, so most famously in the book of Maccabees, it's known for again the Maccabean revolt, how they revolted against Antiochus Epiphanes, and so for example, some of the things that the king again, the Antiochus forced them to do, again, they burned the scriptures, stop the practice of circumcision, which is actually a covenant act, a way of entering the covenant. It's almost like the way Christians look at baptism, entering to the body of Christ. It was they made them work on the Sabbath, could not take it off, take a day off. You would not allow them to, keep their kosher diet, and did everything they could to help assimilate them into the Greek religion and the Greek culture. I gave the one example, the gymnasium, when focusing on the young people, getting them. So the Maccabees again. So that's the end of the trailer for First and Second Maccabees. But then again, that was a way of. But that's where you kind of see more of the kind of the details of what we're reading about in Daniel. Now, but I do want to say one last thing about, again, the significance of Daniel for other times. Today, at Mass today was a feast, was a memorial of 19th century martyrs, Vietnamese martyrs. Saint Andrew Đăng Lộc was one of 117 people who were martyred in Vietnam between 1820 and 1862. The emperor banned all missionary activity. This is in Vietnam, and required Christians to deny their faith. And he had a litmus test. And if they failed it, they were put to death. What did he have them do? Step on a crucifix. Will you step on the crucifix? Because when we read Maccabees, we might say, "No, I'm not going to." They say, "Well, will you eat meat? Will you eat pork? Will you eat some impure?" You're like, why would people die for that? Because the law says don't eat pork. He said, "We'll die for the law." It's more than their allegiance. They were zealous for God. So if I say I'm zealous for God's law, it's not just I'm zealous about a book. I'm zealous about the rules. The 10 Commandments it's like written out covenant, but the idea is like Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. It's a way of showing where your allegiance lies. So it's not just about a, sort of a blind allegiance to just the rules and, that somehow God knows my heart. Okay, I eat the pork, but I'm not worshiping this king. But the point is but again, where's your allegiance? I talked last week about allegiance to the, even when it comes to, political parties and all that stuff, it's got to be God first. Okay. And so just as the version of, and just more recently in 20th century, 19th century, you had, these Vietnamese, that to show that, to renounce Christ, by, crucifix put on the floor, step on it. And those said, no, I will not. Now you might say again, it's just an inanimate object, it's just a symbol, but that's not the case. It becomes just like, no, I'm not. And think about it. I think when if somebody said, if you had a just beloved spouse, that you just adored been married for 50 years, you just have been faithful to each other, you love each other, you forgive each other, and someone says, okay, here, I want you to renounce your spouse, just in their presence, take this picture and rip it into pieces. Or make a statement. You might say, well, sure, I can do it. They know I don't mean it. But maybe they had already passed on and said, well, we want you to, to again, desecrate the picture of them that you remember them by. You're like, I'm not going to do it. You might say, you may have family members say, Grandma, go ahead and do it. It's okay. We don't want to lose you. You're like, nope. I'm not going to curse my beloved spouse who died last year. Not going to do it. There are some things more important. Okay, and it's like so here you had an example in the 19th century again. So where Vietnamese martyrs, were there were priests, there were bishops, there were seminarians, there were religious men and women. There were of the 117 over 50 lay people, the youngest being 9 years old. They refused to renounce Christ. Okay. You can look in the in the 1930s, in Mexico, the famous Cristero Wars, in Mexico, or called the La Cristiada. There was a movie that came out called For the Greater Glory. It's actually a very powerful movie of where the government, to be turned against the Catholics, said you cannot practice your faith. They started putting priests to death. They exiled. They were literally having masses in the size of mountains, hidden places they could go. But again, but ultimately, eventually, people mobilized and they sought to fight for the opportunity to fight for the right to be able to not be persecuted to practice their faith. But again, by the way, their rallying cry was, "Viva Cristo Rey," long live Christ the King. Last Sunday we celebrated the feast of Christ the King. Well, does that mean anything to you? It's like he reigns. No matter what, ultimately say, long live Christ the King. And that's a way of saying also, my allegiance is with Christ the King. So I just share those examples to say that, again, different ages, persecution under the Romans in Jesus' day. You can look at so many different ages, again, where people were persecuted, believers who ultimately were it came down to, were they were really required to renounce their faith and refuse to do so. Of course, there are people who did renounce their faith. But anyway, so just ways examples of looking even at different times. I mentioned these, because again, today was the remembering St. Andrew Danglak and his companions. Where you see again Vietnam in the 1800s and even the 1930s in Mexico, the Church of Mexico was just where people were hung. I mean, priests were hung, and faithful Catholics were hung. Along in public places, on lampposts, just to terrorize and say, mass is illegal. It's very easy when you're not in a persecuted land. It's kind of like, I'll sleep in. I won't go to mass today. It's like, okay, you're people, and then there are people who are secretly having mass under threat of death if they got caught. And so it's always good to remember to read those stories and of the heroic. That's why we have All Saints Day. It's an idea of like the heroes and heroines, those who really who took to heart Jesus' words. By the way, the word martyr simply means witness. Okay, to be a martyr, it means to be witness, and it takes and it's so witnessing that God deserves my ultimate allegiance. When we say at Mass, let us give thanks to the Lord our God. It is right and it is just. It is just. God, I owe that to God. Okay, but again, the key is for us to apply it to our own lives. Again, how do I witness that? And sometimes it can be, so most of us will not be under threat of death to practice our religion. We just might be, well, I'm tired, so I don't bother. Or I have some questions. I have some doubts. So God didn't answer a prayer of mine. Or something bad happened and I'm just disappointed. Or I'm just so sick ahead of another. There's a church scandal, and I give up. It's like so. It's always good to hear the stories of people that went through far worse, and they didn't give up. They doubled down, and they realized something, and what they realized was this: that was consistent throughout history, through churches, salvation history, especially. Is that in the worst times, even sometimes when the failure of religious leaders, God was very consistent in doing so. How did God respond to the scandal of religious leaders, falling, or even just secular forces and empires just being brutal to the believers? What is God's response? Raising up saints, meaning raising up heroes and heroines who rather than shrinking in fear stood up. Rather than running away, like a emergency worker, there's a World Trade Center falling down, people running away, there's other people running toward the fire. Okay, those who stood up and were not afraid, who said, fine, who were like the courage of this mother and her 7 sons, who didn't just say, oh, it doesn't matter. And precisely, again, what's really key about Maccabees is that they specifically mention how, because I know this is not the end, King, you can take my breath, my life, but in fact is God can give it right back to me. Okay. And it was that faith, So literally, that's what's the most beautiful thing is this mother. It says she's begging, she's pleading with her son. Of course, your first thought will be, okay, if she's pleading with her son, it's like, I don't want my son to die. She's pleading. She says, son, my last dear son, don't dishonor your brothers. And please don't deprive me of you in the afterlife. You stand up to the king, you stay faithful, don't shrink from him, be willing, even if you sacrifice your life, by all means do it, because I want to be with you for all eternity. And the mother was the last to die. But literally, just think about that. So I don't want to lose you. So, you stand up to what is right. You do what is right and honor God. And again, that just, so again, I think I love to those, again, to kind of highlight those, because it, just like reading in the stories of the lives of the saints, or like, again, read the details of, again, St. Andrew Dunlop, just what was it like being a Catholic in Vietnam and how did this persecution impact them? It really gives you hope, and it encourages you to realize that, wow, that God, please give me, stir within me that gift of fortitude. Fortitude means courage. It's like stir it up, so that I too would have that courage to be able to live the gospel as He calls us to. Okay, okay. So again, I'm done the trailer with Maccabees, but so again, just your future reading, if you want to learn more, just hear more of the details of this time under this notorious, under many rulers, but particularly this notorious one of Antiochus Epiphanes, and just what they went through. And I think, yeah, okay. So why don't we, if we go back to the text, one other thing here. I guess the one thing I'll just address, it's in the, let's see. Yeah, I mentioned, I wanted to take a quick look at the Catechism, number 2307 to 2309. I know it mentions in one of the footnotes here. But for example, the two things I mentioned in the book of Maccabees, it's really about what comes after the kind of horrible things we're reading. Is like, it's the revolt. It's how the people actually fight against, and even with small armies, victory. So you kind of see the violence of the battle. I mean, literally. You hear about, so often when you have tyrants and oppressors, dictators, you have what do you call it, the rebels. You have those responding, that simply trying to, where innocent people are being slaughtered, and they're like, okay, we need to form our army, we have to do whatever we do to battle against this. And actually that the Cristero War in Mexico, same thing. It was that people armed themselves and rose up against the government to try to fight them, who would not let them practice a religion. And I just wanted to make a mention, if you ever just, in the Catechism, it addresses the Ten Commandments. So in this particular area in 2307, it's talking about the commandment, of course, the fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill. So I just want to read part of that. The fifth commandment forbids the intentional destruction of human life because of the evils. Quite frankly, it's relevant to the news in our current time. Because of the evils and injustices that accompany all war, the church insistently urges everyone to prayer and to action so that the divine goodness may free us from the ancient bondage of war. All citizens and all governments are obliged to work for the avoidance of war. However, as long as the danger of war persists and there is no intentional international authority with the necessary competence and power, governments cannot be denied the right of lawful self-defense once all peace efforts have failed. The strict conditions for a legitimate defense by military force require rigorous consideration. The gravity of such a decision makes it subject to rigorous conditions of moral legitimacy. At one and the same time, the damage inflicted by the aggressor on the nation or community of nations must be lasting, grave, and certain. All the means of putting an end to it must have been shown to be impractical or ineffective. The use of arms must not produce evils and disorders graver than the evil to be eliminated. The power of modern means of destruction weighs very heavily in evaluating the condition. I just want to mention that, for example, you may not know that, for example, the first, I think, the war in Iraq, under this principle of preemptive strike, or preemptive, it's like, and again, it says, the grave responsibility to not just try out every other means, but the certainty. So when you said, well, we think they have weapons of mass destruction, that's why now Saint Pope John Paul II, when the president, time he was President W. Bush, met with him, that he told him that this is not justified. What this idea of preemptive is not justified. The U.S. bishops were strikingly silent about the Pope's opinion when he talked about it, because it would not have been popular among in America. But the fact is, and it turns out he was vindicated, the Pope, when it's like, oops, I guess there were no weapons of mass destruction, zero. But it's kind of too late. We've already, but there's already been this great, like I said, every effort can to avoid war, but also affirms a legitimate law to self-defense. It's like an individual. It's the same principle. The just war is it's the same principle of you have right to defend yourself, because I'm not trying to kill you. You break into my house, it's kind of like I'm trying to fight you off, or you head into my kids' bedrooms, kind of like, I do everything I can to stop you, and oops, you die. It's like, but I'm not a murderer. Fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill. So again, this is relevant because even, today in a recent trial, in Georgia, it's like that was the issue. It's like, oh, you do not have a right, to simply say to simply go and kill somebody because I thought they might have done something wrong. And so that, but anyway, but I think especially because on one hand, it's like you look at the example of Christ, and you have the again, you look at the Mexican Catholics, back in the 1930s, you read about the Maccabees, I think but you also see what we read last Sunday. Peace of Christ the King, Jesus poor Pilate, and Pilate said, are you a king? He says, are you saying that, or have you heard other people say it? He says, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, what does he say? My subjects will be fighting right now to save, they'd be rising up to attack you. They would be, battling against you, but as it is, my kingdom is not of this one. And so I think that ultimately the key is being of allegiances with Christ, and we are committed, as we say in the prayer, he taught us, your kingdom come. And so I think that even the principle of, like, again, it's just not of nonviolence, of how do we achieve our goals without, particularly about destruction of innocent life. There was a very powerful line, and again, I know it was in a movie, Gandhi. I've read a lot of what he's written back when I was in college, but I can't remember this particular quote, but I assume it is accurate. He said, in the fight, in this for justice, referring to, this actually was in South Africa, in the fight for justice, no doubt blood will be shed, but it has to be our blood. Again, you can imagine some were like taken aback by that. It's like when Martin Luther King says, that if every man and woman in the world embraces violence, I, Martin Luther King Jr., will still preach nonviolence. That he saw it as a way of expressing the gospel of Jesus. And yet, but this doesn't mean not resisting. There's, It's how do I resist evil in a way like you that where and fight against evil even without succumbing to, without being becoming basically a part of the problem. As he said, eye for an eye, he just leaves everybody blind. Hate doesn't conquer hate, only love does that. Light doesn't conquer darkness, only light does that. Hate doesn't conquer hate, only love does that. Again, easy words spoken. Again, the exceptions of self-defense, where again, my intention is not to kill, it's just to stop this danger that is being posed upon me or other innocent people. But just I just wanted to maybe just mention that because when you get to again when we talk about the conflicts of nations and whether you're reading about the again the Maccabees or reading about again current situations, but again we do see whether it be the again modern examples, whether it be the Christians, Catholics in El Salvador, who were again, you had both people who were innocently put to death. You have people who also sought to fight the government of rebels who mobilized to just basically seek to stop the killing. Oscar Romero, now Saint Oscar Romero, who's canonized by Pope Francis, was known to be was a powerful, outspoken, and got death threats all the time. And when he finally spoke out, did an open letter to the United States, he simply said, stop sending us the arms, stop sending arms to El Salvador, because they're killing us. The government is using it to slaughter us. And within 6 months, he was dead. But he made a prediction before he died. He said, if they kill me, he said, I will rise up again in the people. And since that time, again, well, there's still, there's still challenges in El Salvador. I mean, the critical, brutal civil war as it was then, ultimately the pressure even on the United States, once this man of God was publicly and, literally shot while celebrating Mass, that, the blood of the martyrs are the seed of the church. That often said, we see the fruit. Christ died, and it's like, and again, the fruit of it. The message here again is something that really that even that is still relevant, to always be relevant, as the scripture will be relevant to our times. Okay. 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 Well, we go back to the scriptures of Daniel, and I want to get to the see if there's anything else to mention in the footnotes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So if we again we've read through 11. Yeah, I wanted to read. If you look at again, remember I kind of gave you lots more of the detail in Maccabees about what was the impact of. So let's look again at Daniel. Let's start with look at the verse. We'll see now in Daniel what we just sort of saw in the. Start with verse 29 of 11, chapter 11. And again, you remember now from reading Maccabees, at the time appointed, he again this again Antiochus shall return and come into the south, but it shall not be this time as it was before. The ships of Kittim shall come against him, and he shall be afraid and withdraw, and shall turn back and be enraged and take action against the holy covenant. Again, remember I said that we had to work on the Sabbath, you couldn't honor dietary laws, you couldn't they burn the scriptures. He shall turn back and give. He shall turn back and give heed to those who forsake the holy covenant. Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and fortress, and shall take away the continual burnt offering. They shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. They shall seduce with flattery those who violate the covenant. But the people who know their God shall stand firm. So again, the people who violated the covenant, Jews who gave in, will be rewarded. However, it says the people who know their God shall stand firm and take action. And those among the people who are wise shall make many understand, though they shall fall by the sword and flame, by captivity and plunder for some days. So those resist, many will again, but still many of them will still be killed. Verse 34, when they fall, they shall receive a little help, and many shall join themselves to them with flattery. And some of those who are wise shall fall to refine and to cleanse them and to make them white until the end of time, for it is yet for their time appointed. Okay, look at the footnote of, let's see. Yeah, and toward the end of the footnote, under, let's say, just above 1133. No, I'm sorry. No, actually, 1135. 1135, it says, refine and cleanse. It says, talk about those who will fall to refine and cleanse them. Here and elsewhere, scripture reveals that spiritual benefits can come through suffering and martyrdom. Okay, I was just mentioning Oscar Romero. I mean, so many, again, the key was, the gospel, I think it was today, not Sunday, by their perseverance, they would save their lives. The idea of those that remain faithful despite the consequences, despite the persecution, and even but somehow that, again, that remaining faithful, that ultimately, and that's what Oscar Romero said, even if they kill me. And clearly people like Martin Luther King felt the same way. He knew he got many death threats, but they didn't stop. They had to believe in more than, that despite that, they continue to persevering, doing what is right, even with the threats, either knowing that God's still going to protect me from the threats. But even if he doesn't, remember early in Daniel, they're going to throw him in the lion's den, or the fire furnace. Said, well, if God saves us, he saves us. But even if he doesn't, we're not going to give in. Trusting that God will use, my fidelity. Your fidelity is superior than whatever you go through, even death. That somehow the fruit of your fidelity is going to outweigh any suffering that was a consequence of staying faithful. God will use it to bring about a greater good. And the greatest example of that is the crucifix itself. That we look at it, and innocent man's put to death, and yet God turned around to something that brought, again, profound life. Okay. So let's look at, I'm going to jump to, because we've talked a lot, we'll jump to verse 40 in chapter 11. This is the time of the end. So we'll finish 11 today. And that, so again, verse 40 says, at the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him. Yeah. At the time of the end, the king shall attack him. Into the south, the end of the king of the south shall attack him. But the king of the north shall rush upon him like a whirlwind, with chariots and horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall come into countries and shall overflow and pass through. He shall come into the glorious land, referring to Israel. Because remember the two empires, the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Empire, in between is Palestine. So you kind of get these major empires. And so, but here it mentions again, he shall come to the glorious land, and tens of thousands shall fall, but these shall be delivered out of his hand. Edom and Moab and the main part of the Ammonites. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall become ruler of the treasures of gold and silver and all the precious things of Egypt. And the Libyans and Ethiopians shall follow in his train. But tidings from the east and north shall alarm him. And he shall go forth with great fury to exterminate and utterly destroy many. And he shall pitch his palatial tents between the sea and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he will come to this end, and none to help him. Okay. Let's see here. Yeah, just to interpret some of those things. Let's look at the footnote 11. Let's see. Yeah, it's just interpreting some of the, let's see, like in 44. Yeah, so let's look at the footnote, long footnote 45, 1145. When it mentions in 45 about the, again, and he shall pitch his palatial tents between the sea and the glorious holy mountain. It mentions how it translates a Persian loan word meaning palace, that is palatial, yeah. Here it seems to mean a tent-like pavilion pitched in a war camp. The sea, the Mediterranean, is referring to the sea. The glorious holy mountain, that's the Temple Mountain in Jerusalem, shall come to his end. Temple Mountain in Jerusalem. The phrase shall come to his end prophesies the death of Antiochus in 164 BC. Daniel's prophesying that he'll come to his end. Daniel's description, which seems to imply that Antiochus will perish while staging a military offensive in Israel, is quite different from that of the Greek historian Polybius, who states that Antiochus met his demise after an unsuccessful attempt to rob the temple of Artemis in Persia. A few considerations may be offered in view of this apparent historical error. Perhaps the prophecy is worded to evoke the fate of Gog, another invader from the north, who was slain in the land of Israel and buried east of the sea. The effect would be to classify Antiochus among the arch enemies of God, whose downfall is assured by Scripture. Perhaps the point of the vision is to indicate the reason why Antiochus comes to grief rather than the whereabouts of his death. According to the books of Maccabees, which we looked at earlier, according to the books of Maccabees, 1st and 2nd, the death of Antiochus was a divine punishment for his savage assaults on Jerusalem, both accomplished and intended. A similar message may be conveyed here. Another possibility maintained by those who relate the vision to the distant future is that chapter 11, verse 45 actually describes the death of of the Antichrist, who is thought to be modeled on the figure of Antiochus Epiphanes. Okay, that in the New Testament, the reference to Antichrist describes someone who very much like, I think one of the, let's see, there's a passage, let's see, yeah, in 2 Thessalonians, well, actually, look at if you look at the footnote, yeah, look at the footnote 1136 on the previous page. Yeah, because 1136, he talks about, again, one who basically sees himself as a God. So 1136 footnote says, Antiochus IV made arrogant claims to divinity on his coins, which listed his title as Theos Epiphanes, God manifest. Talk about Nego. I am God manifest. Paul borrows language from this passage when he describes the Antichrist of the last days. Like Antiochus, this dreaded figure will exalt himself against every so-called God and proclaim himself to be God. The scripture verse there is, again, it mentions 2 Thessalonians 2:4. I didn't say that, I think. And it actually, and this is what it is, just Paul's letter to Thessalonians. And in chapter 2, actually, let's look at just chapter 2. It says, verse 1, it is titled Christ and the Lawless One. It says, we ask you, brothers, with regard to the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our assembling with him, not to be shaken out of your mind suddenly, or to be alarmed either by a spirit or by an oral statement or by a letter allegedly from us, the apostles, to the effect that the day of the Lord is at hand. The day of the Lord is at hand. Let no one deceive you in any way, For unless the apostasy comes first and the lawless one is revealed, the one doomed to perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God and object of worship, so as to seat himself in the temple of God, claiming that he is a God. Do you not recall that while I was still with you, I told you these things? And now you know what is restraining, that he may be revealed in his time. For the mysteries of lawlessness is already at work, but the one who restrains him to do so only for the present until he's removed from the scene. Okay, I don't go further. So let me see if there's even further. So the point here, just relating to Daniel, is that the very way Antiochus behaved is very much is really like when Scripture, New Testament, talks about Antichrist. So part of you look at historical figures, it's like the idea of claiming to be good, claiming to be and being powerfully persuasive, impacting, many peoples, but also and ultimately claiming some sense of almost, of divinity, of like, people, we use the term, people worship this person. So part of it is that we know, so just the idea, because in a sense, we talked about where's your allegiance. If my allegiance is, if ultimately I am so filled with myself, an idea that, and actually find that people are persuaded by you, and you have followers that ultimately it leads people away, leads people to me rather than toward God. And so the point is, the incredible arrogance of rulers of the past is not just a thing of the past. Ultimately, as we know, the greatest ultimately fool is a person who says, I will take on God. It's like the, you remember the creator of the Titanic, stated very boastfully, not even God could sink this ship. And God did not sink the ship, but the ocean did. I mean, an iceberg sunk it, so, but the point is, like, whenever they take on such a level of arrogance idea that I am the center of the universe, and God help anybody that follows me and adopts that, so remember, last thing I'll say about this, maybe just think in terms of, as we conclude, remember, if you ask, what's the great commandment? The great commandment of Jesus, of Jesus' day, again, was, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. The two great commandments. The ungreat, in a sense, commandment, the key commandment of the Church of Satan. There is a group. I don't know if the group still exists, but I remember, and years ago, there are Satanists. There are people who claim to be Satanists. You know what their motto is? Thou shalt do what thou wilt. That's it. Not, Jesus was like, not my will, thy will be done. I would say, the creed of the Antichrist, thou should do what thou wilt. Do whatever you want. It's all about me and my will. Me in charge, me ruling, me having my way, even if I have to slaughter you to get there. It doesn't matter. So no respect for humankind, human dignity, God's image, no respect for God. Okay, so the idea is that, no, it's all about me. And there's not a ruler yet that's come to this world that didn't end up at some point in the cemetery. None of them last forever. So we're going to start, next week we'll start chapter 12, which is entitled, very short chapter on the resurrection of the dead. So we got a preview by reading Maccabees, because Maccabees was the first to mention in the Old Testament of the concept of life after death and even resurrection of the body. When the mother and the 7 sons, she said, the son says, you can take my hand, that the mother said, I want to see you in the next world. So son, don't disappoint me. And even one of the sons said, go ahead, king, cut off my hands and my feet, because God will restore them, resurrection of the body, in the next life. So again, let's end with a prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Good and gracious God, last Sunday we celebrated the choir anniversary and the theme was grateful. Tomorrow we celebrate Thanksgiving. Lord God, we thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share in your life and to share your life with others. But we thank you for the opportunity to witness to you. We thank you for the privilege of worshiping you, following you, and especially being used of you to bless others. Lord, bless us, bless our families who gather. Lord, grant traveling mercy to those who are traveling. Lord, continue to protect us from the for the pandemic that still impacts us. Lord God, we ask that those who gather together, that we truly may celebrate with great gratitude all of your goodness and your care for each of us. Lord God, we ask you to put a hedge of protection around on us to keep us safe. May your angels dwell in each of our homes. Grant us a restful night tonight, that we may sleep have a good night's sleep and awaken with your praise on our lips to serve you throughout another day. Through Christ our Lord, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Just announcements for tomorrow. Our liturgies. We have our regular